स्टडी IQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
Welcome to StudyIQ's initiative, the podcast. My name is Dipansh Moorjani and it gives me immense pleasure in being your host. In our previous episodes, we have been discussing fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy in detail. All our new listeners can stream to our previous episodes not only on YouTube but on various audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Kuku FM, Hubhopper, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, etc. The topic for discussion in today's episode will be fundamental duties. So tighten your belts because it is time for the podcast of the day. Sir, how can we understand fundamental duties in simple words? And do these duties have a background?
Yes, there is a background to the fundamental duties. Since the ancient times, in Indian society, there has been emphasized on kartavya. This is overall performance of one's responsibilities closer to society, our nation, and especially closer ones to mother and father. The Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Quran, and Bible, as well as other religious texts and doctrines, also emphasized on human beings to carry out their responsibilities without worrying for its rights and ends. Mahatma Gandhi stated that the true source of right is duty. If we all discourage our duties, rights assure automatically to him who performs his duty. The right to perform one's duty is the only right worth living for and dying for. It covers all legitimate rights. The regulations and its restrictive cycles suggest a person approximately about his privileges and duties as a unit to the overall public.
Sir, how can we understand fundamental duties in Indian context? And can you throw some light on constitutional provisions?
When our constitution was adopted initially, the framers of constitution did not claim any essential responsibilities of the residents. However, Part 4A under Article 51A, which includes the fundamental duties for the citizens of India, was introduced into the constitution through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. Fundamental duties are like directive principles, and they are considered as obligations and responsibilities that are bestowed upon the citizens but are not legally enforceable by law. Since the creation of rights must necessarily accompany the creation of duties, which were initiated by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. This was necessary because for any successful democracy, rights and duties are an essential part of democratic structure. These responsibilities were introduced to put in force the pointers of Swaran Singh Committee, pronounced in 1976.
Sir, can you take us through a ride of fundamental duties which are mentioned in our constitution?
Part 4A under Article 51A of Constitution provides the following fundamental duties for every citizen, which were added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, as I already mentioned. The first fundamental duty is to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions. It also includes respecting the national flag and national anthem. The next duty is to cherish and follow the noble ideas which inspired our national struggle for freedom. The next fundamental duty enshrined in 51A is to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. The next duty is to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. The next fundamental duty under Article 51A is to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities, and to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. The next duty is to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. Next duty is that to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. The next fundamental duty is to safeguard public property and avoid violence. The next fundamental duty is to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual as well as collective activity, so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavor and achievements. With the inclusion of those essential responsibilities, our Constitution has been brought in line with Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and also the Constitution of USSR, China, Sri Lanka. We borrow and inspired from all these sources that have enshrined our fundamental duties in our Constitution.
Sir, as you had mentioned that these duties were added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. So we are curious to know that is there any duty which was added by a further Constitution Amendment after 1976?
There are few fundamental duties added by 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002. The fundamental duty added to this constitutional amendment was that if you are a parent or guardian, that you have to provide the education and quality opportunities for education for your child in the age between 6 to 14 years.
Sir, can you enlighten us on the importance of fundamental duties?
There are few importance of fundamental duties. I will quote one by one. First, the fundamental duties remind Indian citizens of their duty towards their society and fellow citizens and the nation in a whole. They warn citizens against anti-national and anti-social activities as well. Duties also inspire citizens and promote a sense of discipline and commitment among them. Fundamental duty also helps the court in examining and determining the constitutional validity of any law.
Sir, for a UPSC aspirant, it becomes mandatory to understand all the aspects of a situation. So after understanding the importance of fundamental duties, we must understand the criticisms which are related to it.
The fundamental duties mentioned in Part 4A of Indian Constitution have been criticized for the following reasons. First, they have been described by the critics as a code of moral precepts due to their non-justiciable character. Their inclusion in the Constitution was described by the critics as superfluous. This is because the duties included in the Constitution as a fundamental word be performed by the people, even though they were not incorporated into the Constitution. Some of the duties are vague, ambiguous, and difficult to be understood by the common man. The list of duties is not exhaustive as it does not cover other important duties like casting vote, paying taxes, family planning, and so on. In fact, the duty to pay taxes was recommended by Swaran Singh Committee. However, it did not include it into the fundamental duties. Some critics also comment that as fundamental rights are so important for Indian Constitution, we also need to provide some safeguards for fundamental duties to perform. And this are the some criticism towards fundamental duties. These all criticism does not mean that fundamental duty should not be there. However, these all criticism guide us that how fundamental duties enshrined in our Constitution can be better.
Sir, when it comes to mains answer writing, it becomes important to understand Supreme Court's observation in fundamental rights. So can you make us aware on what were the observations of Supreme Court in fundamental duties?
Emphasizing the importance of fundamental duties, recently on 23rd February 2012, the Supreme Court in the famous case Ramlila Maidan versus Home Secretary Union of India and others held that a common thread runs through Part 3 of the Constitution, 4 and 4A of Indian Constitution. While decoding any of these provisions, it shall usually be really helpful to observe the scope and effect of such interpretations on all of the three constitutional components rising from those parts. It will create an imbalance if the undue or disproportionate emphasis is positioned upon citizens without thinking about the importance of the duty. The real supply of power is duty, when the courts are referred to as upon to observe the responsibleness of legislative restrictions on the exercise of freedom. The essential responsibilities enshrined under Article 51A are of relevant consideration. All those responsibilities are of constitutional importance. Thus, essential responsibilities are the foundation of human dignity and countrywide character. It is incorrect to say that fundamental duties are no longer enforceable and are mere reminder. They have element of compulsion regarding compliance. So, to make certain a devoted and powerful implementation of fundamental duties, there's want to enact suitable legislation whenever necessary to require obedience of the responsibilities with the aid of the residents of the country.
Sir, thank you for your guidance. Dear listeners, it is time to wrap up this episode of the podcast. We will be back soon with another episode. Till then, keep studying and stay connected with StudyIQ. You can listen to StudyIQ Presents the podcast on various audio streaming platforms such as Hubhopper, Spotify, Kuku FM, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, etc. Links are pinned in the comment section below. Thank you.